There's a quiet secret hidden in plain sight, one the most successful, peaceful, and magnetic people on earth carry like a second heartbeat. They act as if everything always works out, not because life never goes wrong, but because they've stopped making fear their operating system. You see, most people live in constant negotiation with worst-case scenarios. Their minds become survival machines. They plan, predict, and panic, not because they're careful, but because somewhere deep inside they assume things will go wrong. It's subtle, it's disguised as logic, but it becomes a prison of hesitation. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine waking up and assuming that whatever happens, good, bad, confusing, delayed, sudden, it's working in your favor. Not because you're naive, but because you've trained your lens. You've chosen to believe the story where life is rigged for your growth, not your punishment. That assumption, repeated long enough, becomes identity. And identity shapes behavior. Behavior creates outcomes. That's the loop most people never interrupt. They don't act like things will work out, so they never see the version of life where it could. There's a famous experiment in psychology where participants were told a game was rigged slightly in their favor. Just a hint of advantage. And guess what? They performed better. Not because the system changed, but because their belief about the system changed. That's the power of assumed outcome. It doesn't just affect mood, it affects motion. If you believe things will crumble, you subconsciously delay, sabotage, or second guess. But if you believe that even the chaos is a corridor toward clarity, you move faster, you move bolder, you move with the lightness of someone who stopped begging for life's permission. But let's be honest, most people don't live that way. They wait for certainty before they walk. They want guarantees before reaction, and they call it being smart. But what they don't see is how many versions of themselves they've left behind. Versions that could have thrived, created, or healed if only they'd moved like it was already okay. Acting as if everything always works out isn't reckless, it's strategic alignment with reality. Because the truth is, life rarely follows our timeline, but it always follows our energy. Your energy is either magnetizing your future or mirroring your fear. If you assume delay means denial, you'll resist. If you assume obstacles are redirections, you'll adapt. And the person who adapts wins, not immediately, but inevitably. That's the mindset of those who act as if it's all working. They don't avoid problems, they translate them. They don't force clarity, they carry conviction. Because at the deepest level, they've already decided this ends in alignment. Not because the road is smooth, but because they'll sculpt meaning out of any mess. This isn't just mindset, it's mechanics. Your nervous system, your decision-making, your creativity, they all expand when stress is replaced by trust. And the only way to train trust is repetition, not journaling, not vision boarding, but repeated action under uncertainty, guided by the internal decision that this is for me, even if it's hard. Even if it's slow, even if it's confusing. Acting like everything works out doesn't mean you don't doubt. It means you doubt forward. You question things while still walking. You cry while still building. You fall while still reaching. And eventually reality starts to reflect the frequency you refuse to drop. Doors open, people show up, ideas land, not by magic, but by energetic consistency. You stayed in the field long enough for the seeds to notice. That's the forgotten truth of manifestation. It's not just about thoughts, it's about emotional rehearsal. Every time you walk with certainty, even in uncertainty, you become a clearer signal to the outcomes that match your faith. That's not spiritual fluff. That's neurobiology. That's behavioral economics. That's quantum psychology. And that's where we begin, by breaking the lie that fear is realism and trust is delusion. Because the most delusional thing you can do is act like your hesitation will keep you safe. It won't. It'll just keep you stagnant. So from this point forward, decide this, even this, especially this, is working for me. And the moment you do, life shifts its mirror. Think about the last time you hesitated, the last time you sat in silence, overthinking a message, a move, a mission. That version of you, the one stuck between action and avoidance, is not the real you. It's a rehearsal of fear, a simulation of defeat, And yet so many live there, not because they want to fail, but because they haven't yet decided to win. But what if you flipped it? What if every action you took came from the version of you who had already succeeded, the one who got the job, built the brand, healed the wound, won the fight? If you were already that version, would you still be afraid of what's next? Would you still need everyone's opinion before trusting your own? Would you still shrink to fit someone else's comfort zone? That's the shift. Acting as if everything always works out isn't just about faith, it's about embodiment. When you become the person who already received the outcome, your choices recalibrate, your tone changes, your posture softens. Not back. Nothing matters. But because your inner world is no longer negotiating your worth, it's confirmed, sealed, done. People will feel it. They won't know why, but your presence will register differently. It won't scream. It won't prove. It will simply be. And in a world addicted to noise, someone who moves without needing approval becomes magnetic. That's the real power of this mindset. Not arrogance, but authority. Not prediction, but preparation. You're not hoping things go your way. You're preparing as if they already did. And that does something radical to your nervous system. You stop living in anticipation of disaster. You stop bracing for impact. You start breathing deeper, smiling longer, moving cleaner. You're no longer a threat to your own timeline because you're no longer trying to earn outcomes. You're aligning with them. That's when synchronicities multiply. You say the right thing without overthinking it. The connection arrives the moment you stop begging for it. The idea lands the second you drop the mental war. It's not coincidence, it's coherence. Your inner world becomes so consistent, so congruent, that life has no choice but to match it. Because here's the truth, the universe doesn't respond to begging, it responds to alignment. It doesn't listen to your anxiety, it listens to your certainty. And the fastest way to generate that certainty is to act like it's already real. To wake up and move as if your name is already written on the opportunity, as if the love is already here, as if the healing is already done. And from that energy, you don't chase, you attract. Now let's go deeper. Why do most people fail to act this way? Because they think it's lying. Because they associate confidence with delusion. They were taught to prepare for disappointment just in case, to lower expectations so the fall doesn't hurt as much. But what they don't realize is this: low expectations don't protect you from pain. They guarantee it. They keep you in a frequency where disappointment is the norm. And when your body rehearses that emotion daily, your life starts building sets for it. But you can rewire that, not through hype, through habit. When you repeatedly act as if everything works out, even in small ways, you train your system to feel safe in motion. You normalize success. You familiarize your mind with peace. And soon, that becomes your baseline. Not hope, not desperation. Knowing. You start choosing the bolder path, not because it's easier, but because it's already yours. You start saying no to what you used to settle for because your future self would never tolerate that. You start walking away from people who trigger the version of you that always doubted. Not because they're bad, but because they no longer match your script. The script you rewrote the day you stopped outsourcing faith. And here's the paradox. The moment you no longer need things to work out is often when they do. Because you've stopped assigning your worth to the outcome. You're not performing for the finish line. You're expressing the identity of someone who already crossed it. That's why some people seem lucky. They're not. They're just emotionally calibrated to abundance, to stability, to victory, and life follows the blueprint they embody. So next time you walk into a room, ask yourself, if everything had already worked out, how would I carry myself? If you already had the deal, the love, the clarity, how would you speak? How would you breathe? How would you sit with you? In certainty, knowing it's just the prelude to alignment, because that's the only difference between stuck and unstoppable. Rehearsal, the rehearsal of peace, the rehearsal of success, the rehearsal of I'm already who I'm becoming. You don't have to believe it fully, you just have to behave like it's possible. And in doing so, you create the very reality you used to wait for. There's a moment right before something shifts, where everything looks like it's falling apart. The message doesn't come, the door closes, the silence grows louder. And in that moment, most people retreat. They take the discomfort as proof that it's not working, that they were wrong to believe, that certainty is foolish and hope is dangerous. But here's the truth that few understand. The reality in front of you is not the final draft. It's a rough sketch, a snapshot of a timeline that is still bending in your favor, if you keep moving like it is. To act as if everything always works out doesn't mean you're blind to the struggle. It means you don't make the struggle your identity. You don't make the delay your prophecy. You don't translate resistance as rejection. You see through it. You hold your focus while the scene looks broken. Because you know what most people forget. The scene is not the story. It's just the tension that makes the transformation meaningful. And if you can hold that belief long enough, your life becomes unrecognizable. Most people live under the illusion that what they're experiencing now is all there is. But that's like judging a movie by one silent frame. The plot hasn't even revealed its twist yet. The arc hasn't peaked. But because the present moment feels incomplete, they assume it's the end. And so they shrink. They shift their energy from faith to frustration. And energy, once corrupted, starts attracting reflections of that doubt. Life mirrors the fear instead of the future, not because they were wrong to hope, but because they gave up before the shift could complete. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine standing in that same silence, that same void, and still saying, this is part of it. Not in denial, in design. You see the delay and whisper, this too is working for me. That's the muscle. That's the edge. To look life dead in the face while it withholds what you want and still walk like you're chosen. To smile while waiting. To build while doubting. To keep going, not because it's guaranteed, but because your soul already wrote the ending. That's how you bend timelines. You don't wait for circumstances to convince you. You convince them. You move with the energy of someone who no longer needs proof. You are the proof, and life, confused by your certainty, eventually complies. Not because you forced it, but because you trained it. You trained your focus, your language, your body. You no longer flinch in the fog. You no longer narrate your downfall mid-scene. You stay silent, not out of fear, but out of trust. And that trust becomes contagious. People feel safer around you. Not because you solve everything, but because you don't dissolve when things look uncertain. You carry a frequency that says, I know who I am, I know where I'm headed, and I don't need every step to be visible before I walk. That's leadership, that's influence, that's unshakable power. Not the kind that dominates, but the kind that stabilizes. Because deep down, people aren't looking for someone who knows everything. They're looking for someone who won't fold under pressure. That someone can be you, but only if you stop needing your present reality to validate your vision. Only if you stop treating discomfort as a red light. Discomfort isn't denial, it's data. It's resistance asking, do you still believe it's possible? And every time you say yes with your actions, you rewrite the code of your life. You become the architect instead of the victim. And that's when magic starts looking like logic. That's when you see connections forming in places you once avoided. That's when the very things you thought were distractions turn into direction. Even pain becomes instructional. Even loss becomes alignment. Because the mindset of everything works out doesn't just soften your emotions, it sharpens your perception. You begin seeing patterns where you used to see problems. You notice guidance and detours. You sense timing and delays. Your eyes no longer look for what's missing. They look for what's molding. And once you shift your gaze, your entire narrative changes. But let's make this practical. How do you live like this when your bank account is low, your relationships are tense, and your body feels heavy with fatigue? You start with the smallest choice, a decision to interpret this moment differently. You pause, you breathe, and you ask, what if this is building me? Not as an affirmation, but as a lens. And then you move. One small action that the version of you who already succeeded would take. Not for show, not for performance, but to remind yourself, I don't need conditions to be perfect to act like I'm on purpose. That's where most people miss it. They wait for clarity to feel calm, but it's calm that creates clarity. And calm doesn't come from control. It comes from conviction. Conviction that no matter how random or rugged the road feels, the destination is not in question. That's what acting as if really means. It means detaching from doubt, not by pretending everything is perfect, but by deciding that even the imperfection has intelligence. And once that decision roots itself in your behavior, something incredible happens. You stop needing life to reassure you. You become your own evidence. Every step forward becomes a reminder that the worst-case scenario never had the final word. And slowly, the noise quiets. The resistance weakens. The path, once hidden, starts revealing itself, not because it wasn't there, but because your eyes are finally clear enough to see it. This is the life you create when you stop arguing with the unknown and start collaborating with it. When you don't demand certainty, you radiate it. And when you do, the story you're living stops being reactive and becomes legendary. There comes a day when you stop waiting for signs, when you stop asking life to prove it's safe, when you stop pacing around your own potential like it's some fragile thing that needs permission to exist. And on that day, something fundamental shifts, not in the world, but in you. You cross a line, not loud, not dramatic, but irreversible. You stop performing for an outcome and you start embodying a truth. It already belongs to me. The life, the love, the moment. You stop asking, what if it fails, and start asking, what if it unfolds? And that simple question changes your timeline, because most people are just collecting reasons to hesitate. They call it caution, but it's fear with better branding. They say they're waiting for the right time, but what they're really waiting for is the world to feel less risky. But here's what no one told them. The risk doesn't disappear when you wait. It just becomes more expensive. The longer you wait to trust yourself, the more versions of you die unexpressed. And no achievement, no safety, no applause can ever compensate for that. You weren't born to be careful. You were born to be clear. And clarity doesn't come from overanalyzing. It comes from deciding, from stepping, from walking like the ground will rise to meet you, even when it looks like a cliff, because what looks like a cliff to the cautious is just a turning point to the committed. Those who act as if everything always works out, those who dare to believe in invisible order, don't walk straighter paths. They walk deeper ones. And that depth becomes their advantage. Their presence becomes undeniable. Their story unforgettable. This is the kind of presence you carry when you stop trying to manipulate outcomes and start honoring direction. When you realize that your job is not to control life, it's to collaborate with it. When you drop the illusion of needing to predict and instead prepare to receive. You show up, you speak, you risk, you create. You don't ask, will this work? You ask, who do I need to be so that it must? And in becoming that person, you build a gravitational pull. Opportunities aren't chased, they gravitate toward coherence. Now pause and really ask yourself, what would your life look like if you acted like things couldn't fail? Not in arrogance, but in spiritual certainty. Not because you're guaranteed success, but because you're guaranteed growth. That's the real prize here. Not the trophy, but the transformation. Not the finish line, but the faith that grows in the fire. The boldest version of you doesn't need everything to go right. They just need to stay right within themselves when everything's in flux. And when you live from that place, when your choices are rooted in trust instead of tension, something wild begins to unfold. Your peace becomes louder than your panic. Your focus becomes louder than your fear. Your vision no longer needs validation because you've decided to become the evidence you were waiting for, the walking proof that belief, when carried consistently, can bend reality. Let others wait. Let others overthink. You're busy becoming. You're building momentum. You're choosing the bold path in small moments over and over until it's no longer an act. It's your nature. You're no longer living on borrowed confidence. You've earned it. You've carved it. You've walked through enough fog to trust your feet. And when people ask how you did it, you won't have a formula. You'll just say the truth. I acted like it was already mine until it had no choice but to become so. This is your power, not in what you know, but in what you embody. Not in how perfectly you plan, but in how relentlessly you show up, in how you keep your nervous system calm when the bank is low, in how you smile at the sky when plans fall apart, in how you whisper thank you even when you don't understand the lesson yet, in how you refuse to betray your vision just to feel temporarily in control. Because deep down, you know something the world forgot. The ones who change everything are rarely the ones who know how. It's the ones who believe they will. The ones who walk like the future is already written. Who move through failure without flinching? Who see beauty even in the breakdown? Not because they're lucky, not because they're chosen, but because they chose to believe something better was always becoming. And that belief held long enough became their reality. So here's your final shift. Stop waiting for signs. Stop waiting for perfect timing. Stop rehearsing fear like it's a requirement. And instead, stand up. Take the next step. Write the message. Launch the plan. Forgive the past. Say the scary thing. Build the vision. Be the proof. Carry the frequency of someone who already knows. Whatever happens next, it's all part of the upgrade. Even this, especially this. Because the truth is simple. The people who win aren't the ones who had everything figured out. They're the ones who acted like it would work out anyway. And now, that person is you.